Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for taking your time to spend this with us at this moment. And I just want to take this opportunity, as I said, to say thank you for each one of you for being here. I was asked last Sunday to speak at one of the churches in my area. Am I not unmuted?
Are you recording?
Yes. Okay. I was asked last Sunday to speak for one of the ministers in our area. I was actually asked by its board to speak on tithing. And if any, I mean, we're all practitioners and ministers here, and I know we all tithe. But if you've never spoken to a group of people about tithing, it can be quite interesting. Because one of the things you notice very quickly is, to many people, tithing is a four-letter word. And you say the word and you just feel the energy get sucked out of the room. So it's quite interesting of a topic to talk about. But one of the things I wanted to share before we go on about it is that Dr. Holmes, the founder of our denomination, to my knowledge, and I was told in ministerial school, that he never spoke on tithing. What he talked about is the givingness of God. And that's what we're talking about today, is sharing the goodness of life, sharing the goodness of God. And from the Living the Science of Mind, I want to share these words. One of the laws of radiation says that the absorbing power of a substance is equal to the emitting power, which means that the one that absorbs the most must be the one that emits the most. Or to state that proposition in another way, we can take in only what we give out. As Jesus said, give and it shall be given unto you. When we have given out but little and receive only an equal amount, we should begin to give out more. And just as surely we should do this, more will return to us. The giving and receiving are the center of our being. The going out from us is but one end of the coming back to us. And the coming back to us is merely the other end of the going out from us. To refuse to give is to refuse to live the fullest existence. To refuse to give love is to refuse to receive love. That which we refuse to give out not only closes the door on the giving, but also on the receiving. And from the Holmes Reader on Practical Wisdom, we read, life is an eternal givingness, the offering of the cosmic self to the joy of its own fulfillment. You and I are part of this joy, and we find fulfillment only as this joy passes through us to others. Everything moves in circles. When we short-circuit our circle, our own good, we short-circuit our own good when we refuse to pass it on. And from The Power of Decision by Raymond Charles Barker, we read, money does not buy the greatest relationship you have with close friends. Money is process, not gold. Not gold. Be reassured, I am not running down the value of money. No one appreciates its uses and value more than I do. I believe it to be God in action and often state this as truth. It is meaning by which the infinite circulation in my life of affairs gives me ease and joy. I sometimes say money is an idea in the mind of God, the idea of circulation and ease. And then I say that I am an idea in the mind of God, and that these two ideas are coalescent. Therefore, I am money. So what we're looking at here from both Raymond Charles Barker and Ernest Holmes is that circulation, the giving and receiving of the good of the universe, is how we activate and use that power of God, that essence of God. And that as we give, so we receive. I like to use the example, if I were standing in front of you with my fists closed and my hands out, and you threw a beach ball at me, or even more so a softball at me, it would be very difficult for me to catch the ball because I have broken my ability to receive. When I open my hands out and you pitch a ball at me, my chances of receiving it improve greatly because I'm a lousy catcher. But I am a great giver and receiver, so it all works. So as we give, so we receive. And God is the givingness of the universe. Holmes has said in the textbook that there are millions of $1 million ideas floating around in the universe, and they are there for us to be able to receive them. But we have to be open to receive what is out there. And the way we become open to receive is to give of ourselves, to give of our time, our talents, our money, and just to be that opening for receiving. That's the truth of who we are. Reverend Jane likes to refer to God as our business partner. And what we tithe or what we give as part of that circulation of 10% is what God expects for being our business partner. Now, who wouldn't love to have an actual business partner of the human form that only wanted 10%? I don't know. I don't watch Shark Tank very often, but it's, for those of you who don't know, it's a show where inventors come on and try to get the investor angels to invest with them. And when the angels offer to invest, they want a percentage of the company. And as I said, I don't watch it very often, but what I have watched, it's very unusual for them to only want 10%. And their 10%, or whatever percentage they want of that company, comes with a lot of expectations and a lot of instructions of how you're going to run your company from that point on. And yes, these guys know what they're doing, but the people who are lucky enough to get these guys to help them lose a lot of their own guidance of the business. But when we work with God as our business partner and circulating our 10% and giving, that abundance of the universe that always says yes is open to us to guide and direct us into whatever way is the best for us to give as well as to receive. Sometimes people say, well, I can't afford to tithe. I don't have anything, so I can't afford to tithe, or I can't afford to participate in conscious givingness or structured giving, whatever you want to call it. But back in 1880, back when John D. Rockefeller received his first paycheck, he took it home and gave it to his mother. And he was raised in the Baptist church, having a very strong tithing background. And his mother looked at him and said, I would really appreciate it if you would think about giving 10% to the church. And he decided to do that. In the first year that he received a paycheck, he made $95 and tithed $9.50. However, between 1855 and 1934, he gave away, and many of these dollars were to his church and other religious ventures, he gave away $531 million. And he said to those who questioned him that if he had not started his conscious giving when he had a small income, it would be much harder to do it when he had a large income. Also, when he was questioned about his willingness to give so generously, he said, God gave me the money. So he was very willing to give back what he had received. Andrew Carnegie, during his life, gave 350 million. And I'm sure that he had to start on a larger amount before he could give a bigger amount. Had to start on a smaller amount before he could give a bigger amount. So when we think about conscious giving and a structured giving program, we need to remember, especially as ministers and practitioners, which most of us, I believe all of us on this call are, that we are what sets the consciousness of our organization. If we choose to not give freely, if we choose not to circulate our abundance through those locations where we are spiritually fed, we can't be surprised when our spiritual foundation starts having money problems. If we're not willing to give as the leaders of the organization, how can we expect others to give? And I'm really not directing this to Yana as a organization. I'm talking about some other things that I have been aware of lately outside of Yana. But it is so important that as the leaders of a community, that we realize that it is our consciousness that draws a consciousness of abundance to our communities. And the best way for us to express that is through our willingness to give from an abundant nature and to receive equally abundantly. And to me, part of our process of prosperity and abundance is being able to forgive. All of the spiritual teachers that I know of who teach prosperity teach forgiveness. Because when we have unforgiveness that rules our life, we block our divine flow. And I love Edwin Gaines' story about she goes through every month, quarter, and it depends on how long it's been, how deep she goes. But she takes a day and literally sits down and goes back through her life, starting from birth forward in 10-year increments, to see if there's anybody that in her past or present that she needs to do forgiveness work around. And one day she was doing this process and one of her ex-husbands popped into her head. And she thought, but I have forgiven this man before. But since he showed up again, she decided she needed to do the process again. And so she did. And a few days, weeks later, she actually received a letter from him. And they had been separated or they were no longer together. And I believe it was like 20 years. And he wrote her a letter and told her how proud he was of the work that she did in the world and how much he appreciated what all she had done for the world, and thanked her also for their time together. And then he said, oh yes, and you know that $3,000 I've owed you for 15 years? Well, I'm enclosing a check for $3,000. So she was able to release the block she had around this ex-husband and had money show up. I did a workshop with Edwin Gaines. Some of you have heard this story when I was still in practitioner training. So it's been almost probably 20 years. And I did a full 2-day workshop. And then on Sunday afternoon, I was doing a workshop that she was doing for the entire community. And she asked for another tithe. And I had already tithed that day. And I thought, okay. And I sat there and debated, and I decided to do it. So I wrote a check for another tithe when I'd already tithed earlier that day. And she said, as part of her, as she was talking about this, she says, if your heart is not beating hard and you're not sweating, you're not doing it right. And I thought, well, I did it right because my heart was definitely double beating and I was perspiring because I was so stressed about doing it. So I went home, and the next day I went to work, and my team leader stuck her head in the door and said, "Did you notice the award on your check Friday?" And I hadn't even looked at my check stub. And I said, "No, I hadn't." When I checked my check stub, the award that I had received was the amount, the net amount of what I had tithed on the second tithe. So almost immediately, the tithe was covered. That night I went home, and I had continued to do a lot of forgiveness work over this 3-day process. And I went home that night, and I'd actually gone to bed. And something made me get out of bed and go look at the mail. And there was a letter from my life insurance company. And I read it, and I didn't quite understand it. And I thought, well, I need to call them tomorrow and see what's going on. My life insurance company had gone public and was now listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And the policy that I had had with them for that time, I think for about 15 or 20 years, actually had value because I had stock in the company. And I can't remember the exact amount, but I'm pretty sure it was within $2,000 or $3,000 either way of $15,000. I had $15,000 that I did not know I had. And I was in ministerial school at the time and was spending a lot of money. So I was able to cash all that in and pay off a lot of my school debts. And I truly believe the reason it happened was I had done the forgiveness work, as well as had been strongly practicing the laws of giving and receiving. If you do forgiveness work, you may not have a check show up, but I do know that you release the blocks and amazing things do show up in your life. And when we give, so much more comes to us. And it is as important to give as to receive. And many times when we give to someone, or someone is trying to give something to us, and we really don't want to take it or feel like they can't afford it or something like that, the greatest gift we can give them is to receive what they have offered to us. And one of the greatest gifts we can give God is to receive what God is offering us, and to receive it openly and with delight and joy, and then pass it on as we really are in that divine flow. I want to end with an affirmation that is from Living the Science of Mind by Dr. Ernest Holmes. And I'm going to read it through, and then I'm going to read it through in sections and have y'all repeat it with me. Good and more good is mine. An ever-increasing good is mine. There is no limit to the good which is mine. Everywhere I go, I see this good. I feel it, I experience it. It crowds itself against me, flows through me, expresses itself in me, and multiplies itself around me. So repeat after me. Good and more good is mine. An ever-increasing good is mine. There is no limit to the good which is mine. Everywhere I go, I see this good. I experience it. It crowds itself against me, flows through me, expresses itself in me, and multiplies itself around me. So my suggestion for you for this week is to be conscious of your giving and to be conscious of your receiving. And if you don't do a committed giving program, now's the time to start. I truly believe, at least for me, it's not not to give is not an option I am willing to take. Thank you.